Kevin Ryan, Underwriters Laboratories, the company that certified the steel that was used in the World Trade Center, in a letter to Frank Gale of the National Institute of Standards and Technology. We know that the steel components were certified to ASTM E119. The time temperature curves for this standard required the samples to be exposed to temperatures around 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit for several hours, and as we all agree, the steel applied met those specifications. Additionally, I think we can all agree that even unfireproof steel will not melt until reaching red-hot temperatures of nearly 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Why Dr. Brown would imply that 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit would melt the high-grade steel used in those buildings makes no sense at all. This story just does not add up. If steel from those buildings did soften or melt, I'm sure we can all agree that this was certainly not due to jet fuel fires of any kind, let alone the briefly burning fires in those towers. Ryan's statements directly contradict statements from so-called experts, which claim that 2,000-degree heat inside the World Trade Center caused the towers to collapse. Days after writing this letter, Kevin Ryan was fired from his position.
FPA 921 is the guide for fire and explosion investigations. Was it used? They say unusual residues could arise from thermite, magnesium, or other pyrotechnic materials. In a crime scene, which this was an example of, did NIST use the guide? No. They acknowledged they didn't even look for such evidence. But others did. Dr. Stephen Jones performed chemical analysis on the previously molten metal. He did some background research, again part of the scientific method. Thermite would create a characteristic burn pattern with a white ash, a white-yellow hot liquid metal, an intense white reaction zone seen. It would also leave behind chemical evidence, common elements such as iron, aluminum, copper, calcium, silicon, unusual elements such as fluorine and manganese left behind also in the residue. These elements here. He sent a sample from this 40-pound chunk of previously molten metal from one of those meteorites. He finds that it's predominantly iron, so we can rule out aluminum from the jet plane. It has small amounts of aluminum, sulfur, and potassium, and manganese and fluorine in abundance. Manganese is from the potassium permanganate, commonly used as an oxidizer in thermite. Fluorine is also used in sol-gel type thermite charges. So these appear to be the thermite fingerprint. Let's take a look at what else Dr. Jones found in the slag from the end of this memorial at Clarkston University. He performs his X-ray fluorescence on this small piece of slag and finds, once again, iron, sulfur, potassium, manganese, calcium. Gel explosives are all a super thermite, tiny aluminum particles in iron oxide in this sol gel. They can be cast into shape. They're like a clay. Lawrence Livermore Lab did research on this, and this invention offers a thermite-based apparatus for cutting target materials. You pack the thermite in here, and you ignite it, and it comes out and is forced through melting the structural steel element in fractions of a second, almost as effective as high-energy explosives, RDX and C4, which are more common in classic controlled demolitions. If sol gels were used, they would leave behind a very unique signature, 1,3-diphenyl propane. And in fact, EPA finds one molecule in their toxicological studies at levels that dwarfed all others, 1,3-diphenyl propane. Eric Schwartz says we've never observed it in any other sampling we've ever done. Now, all of this is direct evidence of explosive destruction in Building 7. We'll jump back to only Building 7 now. Now, none of these characteristics can be explained by fire, let alone all of them. Why? Well, buildings are protected from fire. High-rise steel frame buildings in particular have 2- and 3-hour fire protection designed to allow the occupants to escape a fire. But even after, in fires that are much longer than 2 hours, larger, these buildings have not collapsed. Why? Let's take a look. Here's New York, 1970, burned 6 hours over 5 floors. Los Angeles, 3.5 hours over 5 floors. Philadelphia, 18 hours over 8 floors. Caracas, Venezuela, burned 17 hours over 26 floors. Not one of these fires brought these high-rises down. In fact, no steel frame high-rise building has ever been brought down by any fire. Yet relatively small and randomly placed fires and a whole lot of smoke is to have brought this skyscraper, Building 7, down in 6.5 seconds after burning in just that afternoon. How about that FEMA report and these investigations? Well, we had 4 investigations starting in 2001 with the ASCE, American Society of Civil Engineers. We're told these are volunteers, but these are not your average PTA volunteers. These guys earn $10 million annually, average, between them, working for the Defense Department with their expertise mainly on blast resistance of buildings. Then we have the FEMA report in 2002. Which finally got some funding, $600,000. Compare that to the $40 million effort to find out the source of those stains on Monica Lewinsky's dress. This is easily the 3rd worst structural failure in modern history. It deserves a far greater response and resources.
Governor Keane, may I ask another question, please? At 5:20 p.m. on September 11th, World Trade Center building number 7, 47-story modern frame steel skyscraper that no plane hit, collapsed into a neat little pile onto itself and exhibiting all the characteristics of controlled demolition. FEMA, in their investigation, didn't say that. They said that fire must have knocked it down, but they couldn't figure out how. Video evidence shows what appears to be explosive squids going up the side of the building from south to north or from bottom to top as the building collapsed. There was molten metal found in the basement of that building at temperatures that exceeded anything a normal fire could cause. With all the confusion about what happened to Building 7, why is there not a word about the collapse of that building in the 911 Commission report?
We didn't see any evidence of the kind of thing you're talking about. We thought that was part of the tragedy of 9/11.
There was
building
no
collapsed
evidence.
later on. There was not a loss of life in that building. And it was not part of our report.
Not part of the report. Thanks.
Governor?
So for the 9/11 Commission to totally ignore that, I think is unconscionable and shows that they did not do a thorough job.